My own parents told me not to bring my children to Christmas because my brother's girlfriend was supposedly too classy for them. I believed her for days. Until she walked into my house, saw an old photograph, and whispered, "I know you." That single moment exposed a lie that changed everything I thought I knew about my family. Before we begin, tell me in the comments, if your parents chose someone else's opinion over your children, what would you do? Now let me tell you exactly how it all happened. The moment my mother told me not to bring my children to Christmas, I thought she had to be joking. She wasn't. My name is Lucia Volkova. I'm 36 years old, and I live in Portland, Oregon, with my two children, Ethan, who is 10, and Lily, who is 7. 3 years ago, after my divorce, I bought a modest 2-story house in a quiet neighborhood. It wasn't large or luxurious, but every corner reflected the life we had built together. Family photos lined the hallway. Children's artwork covered the refrigerator. The living room always had books, blankets, and toys scattered around because I believed a home should feel lived in, not staged. My younger brother, Adrian, had chosen a very different path. At 32, he worked in corporate finance in Seattle and had recently started dating Vanessa Hartwell, an event planner known for organizing exclusive galas and luxury weddings. Vanessa came from a wealthy social circle. She dressed impeccably, spoke with perfect confidence, and always seemed aware of how every room looked the moment she entered it. My parents admired her almost immediately. Whenever they visited Adrian, they came home talking about Vanessa's manners, her career, and how sophisticated she was. At first, I smiled through those conversations because I assumed they were simply happy that Adrian had found someone successful. Looking back now, I should have noticed how often they compared us. Vanessa has such elegant taste. Vanessa knows how to host people properly. You and Vanessa are just different. Every comparison sounded harmless on its own. Together, they slowly became impossible to ignore. 2 weeks before Christmas, my children could barely contain their excitement. Every evening after school, Ethan counted down the days on a paper calendar taped to the kitchen wall. Lily kept asking whether Grandma would make her famous cinnamon cookies again. Christmas at my parents' house had always been our biggest family tradition. The cousins played games, the adults cooked together, and everyone exchanged gifts after dinner. At least, that had always been the tradition. One Thursday afternoon, I was pushing a shopping cart through the grocery store while checking off items on my phone. I had already picked up ingredients for gingerbread cookies, hot chocolate, and the casserole my mother always asked me to bring. Just as I reached the dairy aisle, my phone rang. "Mom." I answered with a smile. "Hi, Mom. I'm already shopping for Christmas." There was no cheerful greeting on the other end. Instead, I heard a long silence. Finally, she spoke. "Lucia, we need to talk." Her voice sounded unusually careful. I stopped walking. "What's wrong?" "It's about Christmas." My stomach tightened. "Is someone sick?" "No." Another pause. "It's just that, we've decided to do things differently this year." I leaned against the shopping cart. "What do you mean?" She took another slow breath before saying the sentence that would replay in my mind for weeks. "We don't think you should bring Ethan and Lily this year." I laughed automatically. "What?" "The dinner will be adults only." I waited for the punchline. None came. "I don't understand." Mom lowered her voice. "Vanessa feels your children might be a little too energetic." I stared at the shelves in front of me without seeing any of them. "My children are energetic?" "She thinks a quieter atmosphere would be more appropriate." "For Christmas?" "Lucia." "No, Mom." "Say it clearly." She hesitated. "Vanessa said she's worried your children might create too much chaos." The words landed harder than I expected. Chaos. That was the word. Not noisy. Not excited. Not playful. Chaos. I looked around the grocery store. Families were shopping together. Children laughed as they reached for candy canes. A little boy pushed a miniature shopping cart while his father pretended to race him toward the checkout lanes. That looked like Christmas. Not whatever my mother was describing. And Dad agreed with this? Yes. And you agreed too? She didn't answer. Her silence answered for her. I felt something inside me settle into complete calm. Not because I accepted what she'd said. Because I suddenly realized arguing wouldn't change anything. I placed the carton of milk back onto the shelf. Then I spoke as evenly as I could. No problem. Lucia. I hope all of you have a wonderful Christmas. Before she could respond, I ended the call. For nearly a minute, I stood motionless in the middle of the grocery store. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was stunned. My own children, the only grandchildren my parents had just been excluded from Christmas because someone they had known for only 6 months thought they weren't refined enough. I abandoned my shopping cart and walked outside into the cold afternoon air. The December wind felt sharp against my face. I sat inside my car with both hands resting on the steering wheel. Then I finally allowed myself to cry. Not because Christmas dinner had been cancelled. Because I couldn't understand how my parents had chosen the comfort of a stranger over the happiness of their own grandchildren. By the time I drove home, I had made one decision. I wouldn't beg for an invitation. If they didn't want my children there, they wouldn't have to worry about seeing any of us. I would make our own Christmas. One filled with laughter. One where children didn't have to apologize for acting like children. As I unlocked the front door, Ethan came running toward me. Mom! Can we make gingerbread houses this weekend? I forced a smile. Absolutely. He grinned before racing back into the living room. Watching him disappear around the corner reminded me exactly why I had refused to argue on the phone. Some things are worth protecting. My children were at the top of that list. I believed the conversation with my mother had ended there. I couldn't have been more wrong. Because less than 24 hours later, every person involved in that phone call would be standing on my front porch. And one unexpected question would change everything. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard my mother's voice repeating the same sentence. Vanessa feels your children might be a little too energetic. It wasn't just the rejection that hurt. It was how easily my parents had accepted someone else's opinion over years of memories with their own grandchildren. The next morning, I woke before sunrise. Rain tapped softly against the bedroom window while the house remained quiet. I made coffee, wrapped myself in a sweater, and sat at the kitchen table staring at the Christmas shopping list I no longer needed. By 8 o'clock, Ethan and Lily were awake. They rushed downstairs wearing matching holiday pajamas, arguing over which Christmas movie we should watch first that weekend. Neither of them knew anything about the phone call. I intended to keep it that way. Children shouldn't carry adult disappointments. After breakfast, Ethan asked the question I had been dreading. Mom, do you think Grandpa will let me help him build the fire this year? For a brief second, I couldn't answer. Then I smiled. We're still figuring out Christmas plans. He nodded without suspicion and returned to finishing his cereal. I silently promised myself that no matter what happened, this Christmas would still become one they remembered for the right reasons. Late that morning, I was helping Lily decorate paper snowflakes when someone knocked on the front door. 3 slow knocks. Not hurried. Not hesitant. Deliberate. I wasn't expecting anyone. Looking through the window beside the door, I froze. My parents stood on the porch. Behind them was Adrian. And standing quietly beside him was Vanessa. For several seconds, none of us moved. Finally, I opened the door. Well, I said calmly, this is unexpected. My father forced an awkward smile. We thought talking in person would be better. I stepped aside. If you're here to apologize, come in. Nobody answered. That silence told me everything. They weren't here to apologize. As everyone entered, Ethan and Lily looked up from the living room floor. Grandma! Lily shouted happily before running toward her. My mother's face immediately softened. She hugged Lily tightly. Then Ethan hugged my father. Watching my children greet them with complete excitement made the situation even more painful. The kids had no idea they had almost been erased from Christmas. Vanessa remained near the entrance. She looked uncomfortable for the first time since I'd met her. Unlike previous family dinners where she always appeared polished and confident, today she kept adjusting the sleeve of her expensive coat as if she suddenly didn't know where to stand. You have a beautiful home, she said quietly. Thank you. She slowly looked around. Her eyes paused on the framed family photographs covering one wall. Pictures from birthdays, camping trips, school plays, messy pumpkin carving contests. Every photograph showed smiling children. Nothing looked perfect. Everything looked real. My father cleared his throat. We wanted to explain. I crossed my arms. I'm listening. Before anyone could continue, Lily ran into the kitchen. Mom! I forgot to show Grandma my school project. She returned carrying a handmade family tree decorated with glitter. At the center, she had drawn everyone. Me. Ethan. Herself. Grandma. Grandpa. Uncle Adrian. Even Vanessa. She proudly handed it to my mother. I made room for everybody. No one spoke. My mother's eyes filled with guilt. Vanessa looked down at the drawing for several long seconds. Then she quietly walked toward the bookshelf in the living room. I watched her expression change. Confusion. Recognition. Shock. She reached for a framed photograph sitting beside several old family albums. It was a picture taken 5 years earlier during a community volunteer event downtown. I had almost forgotten it was there. Vanessa picked it up with trembling hands. She stared at the photo. Then she slowly turned toward me. Her face had completely lost its color. She looked at Adrian. Then back at me. Finally, she whispered. Wait. Nobody breathed. She pointed toward me with the photograph still in her hand. Is she? Her voice cracked. Your sister? Adrian frowned. Yes. Vanessa continued staring at me as though the room had disappeared around us. She shook her head in disbelief. No. She whispered the words almost to herself. It can't be. I searched her face, trying to remember where I might have seen her before. Nothing came to mind. I'm sorry, I said carefully. Have we met? Instead of answering immediately, Vanessa lowered herself into the nearest chair. Her hands were visibly shaking. When she finally looked back at me, her eyes were completely different. The confidence she had always carried was gone. I know you, she said softly. But you don't remember me. The room fell completely silent. Whatever explanation she was about to give had nothing to do with Christmas. And judging by the fear in her voice, it was about to change everything I thought I knew about the woman my family had blamed for tearing us apart. No one said a word. The only sound inside the house came from the ticking clock above the fireplace. Vanessa still held the framed photograph in both hands. She looked at me as though she had stepped backward into a part of her life she had spent years trying to forget. I know you, she repeated. I searched my memory again. I'm sorry, I admitted. I really don't remember. She gave a small nod. I didn't expect you to. My father glanced impatiently between us. Vanessa, what is this about? Instead of answering him, she asked me a question. 5 years ago, did you volunteer at the Multnomah Community Legal Center? The name immediately brought back memories. Every Saturday for almost a year, I had volunteered there helping people complete paperwork, organize appointments, and connect with free legal services. I wasn't a lawyer. I simply helped wherever I could because I had flexible hours at the time. Slowly, old faces began returning to my mind. Single parents. People facing eviction. Victims of financial abuse. Immigrants trying to understand complicated forms. Then one memory stood out. A young woman. She had arrived soaked from the rain. She barely spoke. She cried almost the entire afternoon. I remembered making tea for her while she filled out documents with trembling hands. My eyes widened. You were the woman who wouldn't tell anyone your last name. Vanessa nodded. Yes. The room became completely still. Adrian looked utterly confused. You two actually know each other? We met only once, Vanessa answered. But it was the worst day of my life. She carefully placed the photograph back on the shelf before sitting down. Her voice remained calm, but every sentence carried years of emotion. When I was 26, I worked as an assistant for a wealthy businessman in Seattle. She paused. He controlled everything. My salary. My apartment. My bank account. My phone. My mother covered her mouth. Vanessa continued. I thought he was helping my career. He was actually trapping me. Eventually, she discovered that debts had been opened in her name without her knowledge. She tried to leave. He threatened lawsuits, destroyed her professional reputation, and convinced people she was unstable. She had nowhere to go. That was when she fled to Portland. She found the Legal Aid Center. And there, she met me. I don't think we spoke for more than an hour, Vanessa said while looking directly at me. You brought me tea. You helped me finish paperwork. And before I left, she smiled sadly. You gave me a grocery gift card from your own wallet because you noticed I kept pretending I wasn't hungry. The memory hit me all at once. I had almost forgotten that afternoon because helping people there had simply become part of my routine. To me, it had been one difficult day among many. To Vanessa, it had clearly become something much bigger. I never even thanked you, she whispered. You don't have to. No. She shook her head. I disappeared because I wanted to erase that version of myself. She took a slow breath before continuing. I moved away. I changed jobs. I built a successful business. I surrounded myself with people who only knew the polished version of Vanessa Hartwell. She looked around my living room. I convinced myself that if everything around me looked perfect, no one would ever guess how broken my life used to be. My children quietly peeked around the corner, sensing the adults were having an unusually serious conversation. Vanessa smiled gently at them. They're wonderful kids. I studied her face carefully. If that's true, why did you tell my parents they shouldn't come to Christmas? Her smile disappeared. Confusion replaced it. What? My mother said you called my children chaotic. Vanessa blinked several times. I never said they shouldn't come. The room instantly became tense. Adrian frowned. What do you mean? Vanessa turned toward him. I told your parents I usually host formal dinners where adults can relax for a few hours before the family celebrations. She looked genuinely confused. I even suggested that Christmas morning should be entirely about the grandchildren. I felt my heartbeat quicken. That's not what my mother told me. Vanessa slowly shook her head. No. I never asked anyone to exclude children. She looked horrified. I would never do that. Silence settled over the room again. This silence felt different. It wasn't uncomfortable. It was suspicious. For the first time since this entire situation began, every person in the room slowly turned toward the same two people. My parents. Neither of them spoke. Neither of them denied what Vanessa had just said. And in that long, uncomfortable silence, I realized the story I'd been told might never have been true in the first place. The silence became unbearable. My father looked at the floor. My mother clasped her hands together so tightly that her knuckles turned white. No one rushed to explain. No one denied what Vanessa had just said. Adrian was the first to break the silence. Dad. His voice was calm, but I could hear the anger underneath. Did Vanessa ever ask you to keep Ethan and Lily away from Christmas? My father answered too quickly. It wasn't exactly like that. Adrian frowned. That's not what I asked. Again, my father hesitated. Vanessa looked completely confused. I specifically remember saying it would be nice to have one elegant dinner on Christmas Eve before the children arrived the next morning. She turned toward my mother. I even said I wanted to bake cookies with the kids. My mother slowly closed her eyes. When she opened them again, tears had already begun forming. She's telling the truth. The room froze. I stared at my mother. What? She swallowed hard. Vanessa never asked us to exclude your children. I felt every muscle in my body tense. Then why did you tell me she did? Before my mother could answer, my father interrupted. Because someone had to make a decision. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. What decision? He finally looked directly at me. For years, Christmas has revolved around children. I blinked. I'm sorry, what? He continued as though he were explaining something completely reasonable. The presents. The games. The noise. The attention. It all centers around the grandchildren. I stared at him in disbelief. So? He sighed. I wanted one Christmas where Adrian could finally be the focus. No one spoke. Even Adrian looked stunned. Dad. My father kept going. Your brother finally has a successful career. He finally brought someone impressive into the family. I thought this Christmas should celebrate that. I couldn't believe my own father was saying these words. You excluded your own grandchildren because you wanted to celebrate Adrian's girlfriend? No. He shook his head. I simply thought children would dominate the entire evening again. Adrian's expression hardened. So you blamed Vanessa. My father rubbed his forehead. I knew Lucia wouldn't argue with Vanessa. Vanessa stared at him. You used me. He didn't answer. You let everyone think I looked down on children. Still nothing. You destroyed my relationship with your daughter before I even had the chance to know her. The silence that followed felt heavier than anything that had happened so far. Finally, my mother spoke. I should have stopped him. Everyone looked at her. He told me it would only be easier if Lucia believed it came from Vanessa. She wiped away tears. I knew it was wrong. But I didn't want another argument. I felt my chest tighten. You watched me believe that another woman thought my children didn't belong. And you said nothing? She nodded through tears. I'm so sorry. At that moment, Ethan walked into the room carrying 2 mugs of hot chocolate. He smiled innocently. I made extra. Nobody moved. He looked around the room, confused by the silence. Did I interrupt something? I forced myself to smile. No, sweetheart. He handed one mug to his grandmother. One to Vanessa. Then he looked at my father. Grandpa, I can make another one if you want. My father reached for the mug with shaking hands. For the first time since arriving, he couldn't look his grandson in the eyes. Ethan smiled anyway. I put extra marshmallows in Grandma's. Then he ran back toward the living room. The moment he disappeared, my father quietly lowered his head. No one had yelled at him. No one had insulted him. Yet the kindness of a child he had been willing to leave behind seemed to hit him harder than any accusation could. Vanessa slowly placed her untouched mug on the coffee table. She turned toward me. I'm sorry for judging your home when I walked in. She glanced toward the children's drawings covering the refrigerator. I spent years believing perfection meant control. She smiled sadly. But your house feels alive. Then she looked at my parents. I think I've spent so much time trying to escape my past that I forgot what real family actually looks like. No one argued. Because every person in the room knew the truth had finally surfaced. But whether our family could survive that truth was a completely different question. After everyone learned the truth, no one seemed to know what to say next. The house, which usually echoed with laughter on weekends, had become almost unnaturally quiet. Outside, the rain had finally stopped. Thin rays of winter sunlight slipped through the living room windows, casting long shadows across the floor where Ethan and Lily had left their board games. My father remained seated on the couch. For the first time in my life, he looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically. Emotionally. Adrian stood near the fireplace with his arms folded. He looked disappointed more than angry. I don't understand you, he finally said. Our father slowly looked up. What? You made this sound like Vanessa couldn't stand children. I never asked you to do that. You put Lucia against Vanessa before they even had a chance to know each other. My father let out a slow sigh. I thought I was protecting this family. No, Adrian answered firmly. You were controlling it. Those words hung heavily in the room. My father opened his mouth, but nothing came out. My mother quietly stood and walked toward the kitchen. A few seconds later, I followed her. She was staring out the window, wiping away fresh tears with a dish towel. I don't know how to fix this, she whispered. I leaned against the counter. You could have told me the truth. I know. You could have called me after Dad made that decision. I know. You could have defended your grandchildren. She closed her eyes. I know. There was no anger left in her voice. Only regret. I spent so many years keeping peace between everyone, she admitted. I convinced myself staying quiet was the same thing as keeping the family together. She looked directly at me. I was wrong. I nodded slowly. Silence isn't peace. It's permission. She began crying again. Without thinking, I hugged her. Not because everything had been forgiven. Because despite everything, she was still my mother. Sometimes forgiveness begins long before trust returns. When we walked back into the living room, we found something unexpected. Vanessa was sitting on the floor beside Lily. Construction paper, glitter, markers, and ribbons were scattered everywhere. What are you two making? I asked. Lily grinned. A Christmas crown. Vanessa laughed. Actually. She held up the crooked paper crown Lily had made. I think I'm the assistant. Lily immediately corrected her. No. You're my helper. Everyone smiled for the first time that day. Even Adrian laughed quietly. Ethan soon joined them with a box of old ornaments. Within minutes, the formal stranger I had met months earlier was helping two children glue sequins onto paper decorations while laughing whenever glitter stuck to her sleeves. She wasn't worried about appearances anymore. She wasn't checking whether everything looked elegant. She simply enjoyed the moment. Watching her with my children made something inside me shift. Maybe I had judged her too quickly. Not because she was perfect, but because I'd believed a lie about her before giving her the chance to show me who she really was. A little later, Vanessa walked over to me. "I owe you something." "You don't owe me anything." "I do." She took a deep breath. "When I walked into your house yesterday, I judged it. I noticed." She smiled awkwardly. "I thought the toys, the drawings, the noise, meant there wasn't enough order." She glanced toward Ethan and Lily. "Now I realize they mean something completely different." "What?" "They mean your children feel safe enough to be themselves." I didn't answer immediately. Then I smiled. "I've always hoped they would." She reached into her purse and removed a folded envelope. "I was going to give this to your parents for Christmas." She handed it to me instead. Inside was an invitation. A reservation at one of Seattle's most exclusive restaurants for Christmas Eve. "I wanted all of us to have one elegant dinner together," she explained. "And then spend Christmas morning with the kids." I looked back toward my father. He slowly lowered his eyes. That reservation had become the excuse he used to divide the family. Vanessa quietly tore the reservation in half. "We don't need this." She smiled toward my children. "I think I'd rather decorate cookies." Lily overheard her. "We're making gingerbread houses tomorrow." Vanessa laughed. "Then I guess I'll need an apron." For the first time since this entire mess had begun, I believed our family still had a chance. Not because the damage had disappeared, but because the people who wanted to repair it were finally being honest. Only one person remained silent. My father. And everyone knew his next decision would determine whether this family truly moved forward, or whether he would spend Christmas completely alone. Christmas Eve arrived 3 days later. For the first time in years, I wasn't loading gifts into my car for the drive to my parents' house. Instead, I stood in my own kitchen watching Ethan carefully arrange marshmallows on top of mugs of hot chocolate while Lily insisted every gingerbread cookie needed extra frosting. The house smelled like cinnamon, vanilla, and fresh bread. It felt peaceful. Around 10 that morning, Adrian arrived carrying grocery bags. "I brought breakfast," he announced. A few minutes later, Vanessa pulled into the driveway with containers of homemade cinnamon rolls and enough baking supplies to open a small bakery. She walked through the front door wearing jeans, sneakers, and a red sweater dusted with flour. Lily laughed immediately. "You look like Mom after she bakes." Vanessa looked down at herself and laughed too. "I'll take that as a compliment." Soon afterward, my mother arrived. She carried an old photo album tucked beneath her arm. "I thought maybe we could look through these together." She looked nervous. I simply nodded. "Come in." One person was missing. My father. No one mentioned his absence. Instead, we spent the afternoon cooking together. Adrian burned the first batch of bacon. Vanessa accidentally spilled powdered sugar across the kitchen island. Ethan declared it looked like a snowstorm. Within seconds, all three of them were laughing. The expensive image Vanessa had worked so hard to maintain no longer existed. She didn't seem to miss it. Later that afternoon, my mother opened the old photo album. Inside were Christmas pictures stretching back nearly 30 years. There was Adrian wearing oversized reindeer pajamas. There was me proudly holding the first bicycle I had ever received. Then came pictures of Ethan and Lily as babies, covered in wrapping paper and smiling at ornaments that fascinated them far more than the gifts themselves. My mother quietly traced one photograph with her fingertips. I almost gave all of this up. I looked at her. No. You almost let someone convince you to. She nodded. I won't make that mistake again. As evening approached, someone knocked on the front door. The room fell silent. I already knew who it was. When I opened the door, my father stood outside holding a small cardboard box wrapped in plain brown paper. Snowflakes had begun falling around him. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, he held out the box. I don't expect forgiveness. I accepted it without opening it. What is it? He gave a tired smile. Something I should have returned years ago. Inside the box was a collection of old home videos. Christmas mornings. Birthday parties. School concerts. Camping trips. Every recording featured laughter. Children running through the house. Family talking over one another. Life exactly as it had always been. I watched them yesterday, my father said quietly. I realized something. He looked past me toward Ethan and Lily, who were building another blanket fort in the living room. The noise I complained about was the sound of my family. His voice broke. And I almost traded it for a quiet house. No one interrupted him. He turned toward Vanessa. I'm sorry. I used your name because I thought it would make my decision easier. It wasn't fair. Vanessa smiled gently. Thank you for saying that. Then he faced Adrian. I'm proud of you. I should have said that without pushing everyone else aside. Finally, he looked at me. I don't deserve another chance. I answered honestly. Not yet. He lowered his head. I understand. I stepped aside. But Christmas isn't celebrated on the front porch. He looked surprised. You can come in. His eyes filled with tears. As he entered the house, Ethan looked up from the blanket fort. Grandpa! Without hesitation, he ran across the room and hugged him. My father dropped to one knee and hugged him back. This time, he didn't let go quickly. That evening, we gathered around the dining table. It wasn't elegant. The chairs didn't match. The cookies were uneven. The mashed potatoes were slightly overcooked. Someone spilled cranberry sauce. Twice. And somehow, it became the happiest Christmas dinner I could remember. Not because everything was perfect. Because nobody was pretending anymore. Weeks later, my father made another decision. He sold the formal dining table he had always insisted was too nice for children. With the money, he bought a large farmhouse table that seated everyone comfortably. When he invited us for Sunday dinner a month later, Ethan accidentally scratched the surface while working on a school project. My father looked at the mark. Then he smiled. It finally looks like a family table. That was the moment I knew he had truly changed. His punishment hadn't been losing Christmas. His punishment had been realizing how close he had come to losing the people who made Christmas worth celebrating. And his reward came only after he accepted responsibility without excuses. Looking back now, I learned that families are rarely broken by loud children. They're broken by quiet lies. The truth can be painful. Apologies can be uncomfortable. Trust takes time to rebuild. But honesty gives a family something perfection never can. A reason to stay together. Thank you for spending this journey with me. If my story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video, leave a comment sharing your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel for more emotional family stories filled with unexpected twists, hard lessons, and satisfying endings. I'll see you in the next story.